A suspected chemical attack in Syria. Anti-government activists say dozens of people have been killed, hundreds injured in rebel-held Idlib. And we'll have updates in a moment from our reporters in the Middle East and at the United Nations as France calls for an emergency meeting. Also ahead,
we are very much behind President el-Sisi.
Throwing his weight behind a Middle Eastern strongman. Donald Trump welcomes the Egyptian president to the White House, kicking off a week of diplomatic meetings. Plus, a suicide bombing in Russia's second biggest city. Authorities identify the man they say is behind the attack that left 14 people dead. Those details coming up. Hello, I'm Lynda Kinkade. Welcome to Connect the World. Well, in Syria, a suspected chemical gas attack has reportedly killed dozens of people, leaving many more gasping for air in a hospital in Syria's Idlib province. Activist groups say airstrikes that hit the city of Khan Sheikhoun gave off a poisonous gas. Video shows emergency workers trying to wash what could be a toxic substance from the bodies of young children. Now, the images are graphic, but we do want to share them with you. CNN still hasn't been able to confirm what kind of substance was used in the attack or whether the planes that launched the airstrikes were Syrian. Idlib province is mainly controlled by a network of rebel groups, and it's often the target of attacks by Syria and its Russian ally. Well, Russia says its jets did not carry out any airstrikes in the area. Well, CNN's Jomana is reporting on the attack from Aman, Jordan, and our senior international UN correspondent Richard Roth has more on France's call for that emergency meeting. First to Jomana, the pictures we're seeing show scores of people wounded, children struggling to breathe. What can you tell us about the attack?
Really horrific images, Lynda. The information we're getting, and we're trying to piece together what did take place in Idlib province in northwestern Syria. And this information is coming from several activist groups, from opposition groups, and also from that monitoring group, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They say that dozens of people were killed, and the figures are anywhere between 50 to 70 people who were killed and possibly hundreds who were wounded as a result of asphyxiation after people were exposed, they say, to some sort of an unknown poisonous gas or a chemical agent. One activist that CNN spoke to in this town of Khan Sheikhoun earlier today says that at about 6:30 a.m. There was an airstrike in the center of the town, and that is where that chemical or that poisonous gas came from. And that it was followed about 5 minutes later by 3 other airstrikes, but that there was no poisonous gas as part of those airstrikes. And as you mentioned, Lynda, throughout the day we have been seeing these images, these videos surfacing, purportedly showing the aftermath of this attack. Really difficult to watch, extremely graphic and horrific images coming from Khan Sheikhoun. And it's unclear at this point who carried out this attack, but Syrian opposition groups are blaming this on the Syrian regime. We have not yet heard from the Syrian government. We've heard from their allies, the Russians, as you mentioned, denying any involvement or carrying out any airstrikes in that area. And the Syrian regime in the past has repeatedly denied carrying out any sort of chemical attacks, Lynda.
And Jomana, we're just seeing some pictures of some children being sprayed with, I assume, is water. How are the victims receiving treatment there? And are there any concerns about further strikes?
Well, Lynda, according to medical workers, doctors there in around different parts of Idlib province, they are really struggling to cope with what some doctors have described as this flood of patients they've had to deal with. According to one doctor, they say they've had to turn back patients because they ran out of ventilators in this one hospital. And another issue they're facing is that so many of the hospitals in this part of Syria, they say, they have been targeted in the past. They have been taken out of service because of airstrikes that have hit them in the past. So they're really struggling to cope. And today we also heard, following that attack, that there was an airstrike that hit near one of those hospitals that was already dealing with the patients, the victims of that alleged chemical attack. Now, neighboring Turkey has set up some sort of an emergency response center across the border to help and assist with these patients, but it is a very slow process from what we understand, because they are washing these patients before they're able to take them into Turkey, because no one really knows at this point, Lynda, what they are dealing with, what sort of possible chemical agent or poisonous gas they're dealing with. And about a couple of hours ago, we heard from Turkey that 15 patients had been transferred over. So it's a very chaotic and a very difficult situation for those medical workers in Idlib province today.
Yeah, no doubt. And just while you were talking, an alert just came across my desk. It's saying that two state-run Syrian news outlets are reporting that there was an explosion at a rebel poison gas factory in the countryside there. So they seem to be pointing the finger at rebels in the area. We'll have more on that as the show goes on. But I want to bring up Richard now and look at the international response. The French Foreign Minister calling for an emergency United Nations meeting. What can we expect to come from that?
Well, we've been down this road before. There's no scheduled timing yet of this so-called emergency meeting, but there is anger at the Security Council among countries who think long ago that the Syrian regime of Assad should have been held accountable for various attacks on rebels and civilians using chemical gas and other substances. A short time ago, the UK ambassador to the UN, Matthew Rycroft, expressed that anger.
Well, I'm horrified by what has happened in Idlib. We do not have all the information yet, but the attack bears all the hallmarks of yet another deliberate campaign by the Syrian regime and their military backers to use chemical weapons. The United Kingdom abhors the use of chemical weapons anywhere by anyone, and we demand that those who perpetrated this attack are brought to justice. The UK and France have called for an emergency meeting of the Security Council as soon as the US presidency can schedule it.
And as the ambassador mentioned, Nikki Haley is the president of the Security Council representing the United States for this entire month of April. It will be interesting to see the U.S. reaction from both Washington and here. You remember nearly 4 years ago, the United States, which had threatened Syria if it had crossed some red lines, well, eventually an agreement was worked out to do away with chemical weapons. And here we are again. The UN Security Council is very divided, and it is likely Russia would especially block any Security Council action that might be targeted at the Assad regime, at least at this point, as far as we know. Lynda.